The Corsair was the most beautiful airplane that I ever seen and shot in the air until I shot the Connie. One of the coolest photo shoots that I ever got the opportunity to do was with the original Air Force One constellation called Columbine 2. I was working at Love Field at the time, doing line service, and Scott Glover, who owns the Mid-America Flight Museum, used to fly in there. One day he walked up, and because we'd kind of struck a friendship up by this point, and he goes, "Hey, what are you doing at this date?" And I'm like, "That is a few months from now." And I go, "I have no idea, but if you're asking me what I'm doing this day," and I go, "There's got to be something cooking here." And I go, "What is it?" I go, "I can probably make myself available." And he goes, "Well, Carl Stolfos, who owns Dynamic Aviation, was friends with Scott." And he goes, "Carl bought Columbine 2." And the name was kind of ringing a bell, and I go, and so I'm trying to put it together. He goes, "That's the Connie that was over in Santa Fe for a long time. Now it's in Marana, Arizona. It's been sitting in Marana, Arizona for like 15 years. Hadn't flown." And I was like, "Oh, wow. It's a Connie. I mean, that's one of the most beautiful." The Corsair was the most beautiful airplane that I ever seen and shot in the air until I shot the Connie. But he goes, "Hey, they've been working on it for about a year and a half to return it to flight, not a ferry flight, to return it to service flight. Friend, they're going to fly it from Marana, Arizona to Mount Pleasant and then do a conditional stop or maintenance stop out there and inspect the aircraft. And then from there go to Bridgewater, Virginia." And he goes, "We're going to take the B-25 out there as a camera ship." Okay. And he goes, "Would you like to go?" And I couldn't say yes fast enough. So that time comes around. And he goes, "Hey, you remember the Connie trip that I mentioned?" I go, "Yes." And he goes, "Well, they've been running engines. Screens are looking good. Engines are happy. They're making minimal metal. So they're looking at a projected test flight date," which was, I think, on a Friday, if I remember correctly. And he goes, "They're going to do that, pull the screens, and if the screens are good, no oil or acceptable, yeah." He goes, "Then it'll be the very next day." And I go, "Okay." So I was driving home with dinner. Scott called me on the phone. He goes, "Test flight went good. Screens are clean. So we're going tomorrow morning. Make sure you're out here in Mount Pleasant at dark 30 to hop in the 25." So we did. We took off. On the way there, we stopped in Carlsbad because we had oil pressure bleeding off on number 2. It's just an indication error. We fixed that. Finished the flight over to Marana. And when we arrived there, you could just feel the energy around the Connie. These guys have been working on this thing for a year and a half around the rattlesnakes, the heat, this and that. I mean, just high winds out in the desert. I mean, all these conditions. And here we are showing up to just make them look good. And it kind of makes you feel guilty, though, because you're showing up during the glamour part of it. And these guys have been busting their butts for a year and a half, But to talk to them and hear the trials and tribulations that they've been going through to get to this point, it's just, you could feel the energy. I can feel it right now. It gives me goosebumps. And so we just get the Connie wrapped up throughout the day. The story behind this one, there's 3 Columbines. There's Columbine 1, 2, and 3. This was number 2. And Columbine, and I forget which museums have 1 and 3. Pima has one of them, and the Air Force Museum has the other. I think the Air Force Museum has got 1, and Pima's got 3. But anyways, the Air Force Museum swears up and down that they got the original Air Force One. The story that I've heard, it's this one. Anyways, 8610, I think, is the tail code on the Connie. And at one point when Eisenhower was flying on the aircraft, the controller, I'm probably butchering the story a little bit, the controller got flight number 8610 confused with Connie 8610. And there was potential for a midair. So the pilots on the Connie with Eisenhower said, "Until we resolve this, call us Air Force One." And there's the birth of the name Air Force One. Here we are, the day of the launch. We take off, and it's kind of a reverse engineered photo flight, because normally we fly lead, and then we would position the aircraft around like we want them. Well, that requires a lot of movements. We don't win. Statistically speaking, when an engine craters, it's after some kind of throttle adjustment or power adjustment. So we go, we want you guys to fly your line, and we will maneuver around you. So when we took off, we went this way, they went that way. It took us a while to get married up, and then it took us a while for us to manage our power to get back and back and back. And then because we got Tyson Reininger in the tail gunner position, I'm up around the waist gunner position, and we thought we were both going to be back there. He'd be shooting stills, I'd be shooting video. And Scott said, "No, let's just put Tyson back there. No problem." I stayed in the waist. But I was shooting through Tyson and and I was shooting through a thing about like this big, and you can see it in some of the shots. And sometimes he would move over and it'd open up, and I could really zoom in to see the Connie. It's like, man, that's so cool, you know. But I was shooting through a little gap like that, and it took us a while to get into position. And then we were happy, and then we just kind of tweaked the power on the V25, and then we would just kind of move around. Tyson was calling the shots. And then around El Paso, the Connie just decided she wanted to fly a little bit faster. They didn't adjust anything in the cockpit, and I'll give you that clip. And you see her just coming around the right side of the tail, and the pilots just kind of had dipped down a little bit like this. And then we call up to the pilots, who is Scott Glover and Matt Bongers. We called up to them, say, look out the right side. You're finally about to see the Connie, because this whole time they're going nuts because they know what we're looking at, going, this stinks, because they know how awesome it is. So it comes up, and then Scott's flying. So Matt whips out his cell phone. He's over here trying to shoot over the wing, waiting to see the Connie and stuff. He goes, you guys better be getting some killer shots back there. And then we gave the Connie lead, and it was so nice because then we could just fly around here. Then Tyson and I went through the fuselage, over the spar, into the nose, you know, because you got the glass nose on the B-25, and we were flying around these beautiful desert mountains and stuff like that. And Tyson got some amazing shots out of that, and that was just there. All the bulkheads in the Connie there's no two that are the same, and it looks like a giant whale just surfing through the air. It's beautiful, beautiful airplane. But that was probably the coolest air-to-air mission I've ever done.